Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. With us right now is Professor Abraham Zion, a professor emeritus at our university in Israel. Over a decade, he chaired the Center for Law and Mass Media. He earned his expertise in the Arab-Israeli conflict through intensive research, articles, conferences, TV appearances, radio shows. He also practiced law mainly in the civil administrative matters. He also served as a deputy state attorney for Israel. And his fascinating new book is called To Whom Was the Promised Land Promised? His Majesty government viewed with favor the establishment of Palestine of a national for the Jewish people. But here are some fundamental truths about the Arab-Israeli conflict. Professor Zion, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I noticed your book was published by Mazo Publishers, which not familiar with. Is there any reason why you went to Mazo as opposed to some of the more established publishing companies?
Well, I went to a few publishers, and they all refused to publish my book once they understood that I was going against the usual narrative.
And the usual narrative is that Israel, when Judea and Samaria is occupied territory, the settlers are illegally taking the land. So you're going against that narrative,
right? In fact, they said one of the publishers told me, if you come over to me and ask me to publish a book, to publish your book on the fact that the world is flat, would I do that? Would anyone want to read it? So I said, is it that bad? It's so axiomatic? And he said, yes. The world, everybody in the world, look, all the decisions, the Security Council decisions, the UN decisions, the ICJ decisions, are all saying that the West Bank or Judea and Samaria is occupied territory, Palestinian territory. What are they coming over with something new? And I said, no, but there's no foundation to that. And he wouldn't. So I approached the Mazo, who is in Jerusalem, and he was very happy to do that, to publish the book.
Now, the narrative is that the Jews stole the land from the Palestinians, but you seek out to prove in your book that this land is legally the land of Israel. Did you always believe that, or did you discover that in the course of writing the book?
Well, I did not believe that it's 100% wrong. I thought maybe partly it's wrong, maybe partly it's true.
Maybe so you had some doubt. You thought maybe there is some truth to the fact that this land did not belong to Israel.
This land, because of international law, does not belong to Israel. And I discovered that it's false. That the idea that the land belongs to the Palestinians is just total nonsense. There was never a Palestinian state. There was never a Palestinian people. How did they come to become a Palestinian Palestinian occupied territory? From who did we occupy it? You know how the story of the land of Israel? The story of the land of Israel, the modern story, is that in the War of Independence, Jordan invaded the west of what's called west of Palestine at the time, 1948, and it occupied the territory against the UN
resolution, right?
Against the UN Charter. You know, Section 2.4 says that you cannot occupy land by aggressive war, and Jordan took the land by aggressive war against Israel. Now, it really occupied for 19 years. It never offered the Palestinians a state. The Palestinians did not ask for a state. And in the end, when we occupied this territory, we really came back home. It's like somebody occupying his own home. There is nothing in this occupation that the Geneva Convention should apply. And in fact, the Supreme Court of Israel at the beginning did not accept that. But when the Attorney General said, I don't mind because we are more holier than the Pope. We act in a more...
We go way beyond what we should be doing. But let me ask you this question. David Ben-Gurion, I'm trying to find the source of where I read this. I believe there was some commission from England looking to see who owned the land. And he came in and he said, he has a deed to the land, and he pulled out the Bible.
Yes, well, the Bible says very clearly that the land is Jewish. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to put all my
Eggs in
cards
one
on the
basket.
Bible
Okay.
because
You
I have
wanted
no.
proof from international law that
Exactly,
these lands.
exactly. I wanted to show that according to international law, when they say it's illegal, they say it's illegal according to international law. So in this book, I proved, based on documents, on thousands of documents, British cabinet ministers and international treaties, I show that there is nothing true in that. That the land is a Palestinian land. So how did the ICJ do that? You know, it's fantastic. In the ICJ judgment on the fence, on the barrier, they say that they begin with saying that this is Palestinian land, but they never explain why. And when they put the history, they say in 1917, the British authorities gave this land to partly to the Palestinians, partly to the Arabs, and then they say in 1947 there was a partition, and that's it. They don't say anything about the history of the land. What happened? The Balfour Declaration. They never mentioned the Balfour Declaration, the San Remo Resolution, the British Mandate, which speaks only about the Jewish entity in Palestine.
So let's look at legally. You are a law and legal expert. 1917, the Balfour Resolution. What does it say? Is that the basis for the modern claim of Israel to this area?
Exactly. The
And
Balfour
what is
Declaration.
exactly does the Balfour Declaration say? What land is promised to the Jewish people in 1917
Right.
legally?
And they did not forget the Arabs or the non-Jewish communities. They said the non-Jewish communities will get only civil and religious only.
They would
Religious
get
rights.
civil and religious rights in the land of Israel.
That's it. They
Uh-huh.
get no national rights. They get no national rights. The national rights are given to the Jewish people as the national home for the Jewish people. And why is it a national home? Why did they give a national home? And they did not say a state. Because at the time it was an experiment.
So what land in 1917, what land was envisioned by England that would be a Jewish state, which later became Israel? What territory?
Two
Did
sides of the Jordan. It was
both
it was
sides of the Jordan?
Yeah, it was not defined yet. It was not defined yet. The eastern border was not actually decided upon.
Now,
But
what legal basis would England be allowed to give the Jews a state? On what legal authority do they have to give the land away?
well, the land was given to the Jewish people not by Britain, but by the whole principal Allied powers who won the war in the First World War. Now they were the sovereignty of the whole Middle East was transferred to them by the Ottomans, by the Turks. When the Turks lost the war, in the treaties, they actually gave up their sovereignty in favor of the Allied powers. Now, what is sovereignty? Sovereignty really is having control,
Now
being,
that they were ruling, they were
being,
controlling the land of Palestine, and
is
when they
being
lost.
the owners. No, sovereignty is being the owners of the land. Now, an owner can do with the land whatever he wants to. And at that time, they decided on the mandates. They decided not to annex the areas, but to actually put them on the mandates system in order to give them independence in the end.
So
Now,
what you're saying is England had the right because they got it from the Ottoman Turk. Well, they actually got it from the Allies that gave it to the English to administer. And since England was control and they were the sovereign power, so they were able to say, "Hey, we're going to carve out a Jewish state."
let me explain that. The Ottomans transferred the sovereignty to the Allied powers. The Allied powers gave Britain the power to mandate the area, and Britain took upon itself. It was a commitment by Britain that it will actually take this power in order to establish a Jewish national home in Palestine. That was their commitment. It's not just doing it a favor. the commitment. They had establish that, and they actually betrayed the Jewish people.
Now,
They,
so in other words, they were supposed to give all the land, including Jordan, to the Jewish people. That was envisioned in 1917. I never knew this till I read your book. Come Winston Churchill and change the picture. Who was Winston Churchill? What position did he hold at that time, and what did he do?
Churchill was the colonial secretary, and he was a very powerful man even then. So when Abdallah actually tried to fight the French, because the French ousted his brother,
The King Abdullah. Where was Abdullah? Which country was he at the time? And was that in Saudi Arabia?
Hijaz was part of Saudi Arabia, yes.
Okay.
And Hussein was the emir, was the Sharif of Mecca there. Now, a few years later, Ibn Saud ousted him from power. But what he managed to do is to give his two sons, Faisal in Iraq, a king of Iraq, and Abdallah, king of, he was the first the prince of Jordan, and then he became king. Now, what happened was that the Arabs wanted to fight the French because the French ousted his brother, Faisal, who became king of Syria and Damascus. To appease the Arabs and to ask them not to fight the French, Winston Churchill came to Jerusalem. He was sent by the government. And he told the government, if we don't give Abdallah Jordan and take it from the Jewish people, then we will have to fight them. We have to come in.
Have to commit troops to fight the French.
Right, and this is going to be very costly.
What year are we talking about?
1921.
1921. So 1917, they're going to give everything. 1921, Winston Churchill decides he's going to take Jordan out of the mandate for the Jews and give it to give it to Abdullah, who really was not Jordanian. He comes from Iraq.
No, it has nothing to do with Jordan. He came from.
Just moved him there. They created the Hashemite kingdom out of nothing.
Yeah, it was created out of nothing.
You're a king.
Yeah, it's a puff. Yeah.
Wow. So that's out of the equation. They did it to make sure to appease the Arabs at that point in time. So they broke the word to the Jewish people.
Now to do that, Winston Churchill had to change the mandate, and he inserted Article 25 for that purpose, to say that Jordan will not be the homeland for the Jewish people.
That's what it actually says. Jordan. It says Jordan will not be the homeland for the Jewish people. That's what it says.
No, and it says that Britain may do a few things in Jordan to change the way of political activity in Jordan, and this gave them the power to change the basic homeland of the Jewish people. In other words, they changed their mandate, and they established in Jordan a new form of government, saying that they can all the articles talking about the Jewish people was deleted from the Jordan mandate.
We're speaking with Professor Abraham Zion. He's written a fascinating book, To Whom Was the Promised Land Promised? Some Fundamental Truths About the Arab-Israeli Conflict. And it's published by a publishing company in Israel called Mazo Publishers. Professor Zion, let me ask you this question. The word Palestinian that's used today, and the world community says that Israel has stolen the land from the Palestinian people. Legally, whose name is it? Wouldn't a Jew who was born in Haifa or Tel Aviv in 1925 or 1930, wouldn't he also be considered a Palestinian?
Exactly.
So how did this Palestinian get taken away from the Jews and given to another group of people?
Yeah, this is the funny thing about it. because Palestinians were Jews. They were when the war broke out in 1948. There were 600,000 Jews and 1,200,000 Arabs. They were all Palestinians, but the biggest economy was the Jewish economy. Like the Jerusalem Post was called the Palestine Post. Like the Philharmonic Orchestra was called the Palestine Philharmonic Orchestra, but it was only Jewish. And other entities in Israel, in Palestine, were all Jewish. So when Israel was established, all the Jews called themselves Israel. But you know what? If we insisted since 1967, or even before that, that the West Bank is not the West Bank, but it's Judea and Samaria, it would have been very difficult to say that Judea is a Palestinian place, is a Palestinian territory.
So how come Israeli leadership called it the West Bank? Why did they insist on calling it Judea and Samaria? I know Menachem Begin did, but where was everybody else? And Yitzhak Shamir as well.
This is the question I'm asking, and I didn't get an answer. In fact, I wrote an article last week about it, that the Arab narrative exists here and in the world, and it's false, like two-state solution. What's a two-state solution? Israel exists. What's a two-state solution? They brought us back to 1948, as if Israel does not exist, and now they want to divide the area west of the Jordan between the Jews and the Arabs. But Israel exists for 74 years. So how come it's not a two-state solution? They should have said, we want to establish a Palestinian state in the Jewish homeland. This is how
they did that. Jordan is, based on what you're saying, that in 1917, the Balfour Declaration envisioned Jordan as being part of a Jewish state. And then Winston Churchill changed it in 1921, got rid of the Jordan part to give it to the Hussein family. So in essence, there is already a Palestinian state. If you want to call it such, you can say Jordan is it.
A Palestinian?
If you want, listen, if they claim that they're entitled to a state,
no, he didn't give it to a Palestinian. He gave it to
Jordan, to the Hussein family.
No, he gave it to the Prince of Hijaz. Jordan was part of Palestine.
Right,
It was to be the homeland of the Jewish people. And when Abdullah came over, Winston Churchill wanted to appease him to stop the fighting with the French. So he gave them all the Palestine, which is east of the Jordan.
So should we say, Professor, that we shouldn't go back to 1948? We should go back to 1917?
Yeah. Not in 1920. What's the San Remo Resolution? The San Remo Resolution really divided the Middle East between the Arabs and the Jews. Why between the Arabs and the Jews? Because the Arabs of Hijaz helped the Allied powers in their war against the Turks, and the Jewish people helped the Allied powers in their fight against the Germans and the Turks. So
I'm always on. I thought it was the Balfour Resolution, but maybe it was in the 1921 when they envisioned that the Palestine was supposed to be divided into a Jewish and Arab countries. Was that 1920 or was that 1917? Where did that come about?
No, 1917 was the Balfour Declaration.
Okay, so where did it come about an Arab state in that part? Was that 1920?
The Balfour Declaration only stated that
the Jewish state
will be a homeland for the Jewish people, a national homeland for the Jewish people, and the Arabs will have only religious and civil rights only. Now, in 1920, in April 1920, 25th of April 1920, the Allied powers decided to divide the Middle East between Jews and Arabs. The Arabs got all the Middle East except for Palestine, and the Jewish got Palestine to give Britain to hold this area in trust until the Jewish people become the major part of the population, and they take over the country until they can become the.
I guess until the demographics change, there'll be more Jews there.
The demography would change, and they become a majority, and then they would take over. So they couldn't give the Jews a state at that time because the Jews were a minority. But everything in the treaties speak about the Arabs becoming a minority in the end. Because if you want to give rights to the Arabs when they are 90% of the population, it doesn't make sense, right? If they say that the Arabs will have the Jews will have a national entity in Palestine, and the Arabs will have you will give them civil and religious rights. Why would you say you will give them religious rights if they are a majority? When this was said, they were 90% of the population. The Arabs were 90% of the population.
But how many? We're not talking about great numbers. From what I read, didn't Mark Twain visit the Middle East in the late 1800s and say there weren't that many Arabs there, but there were Jews there, and so they may have been the majority. But it seems like the population swelled later on. At that point in time, there weren't as many Arabs there, or were there?
Yeah, because because of the Jewish immigration, the Arabs came over because they gave them work.
And where did they come from?
From Syria, from Egypt. There are many families in Israel that are called Masri. Masri is Egyptian. And
So when the Jews came, the Arabs also migrated to the land.
right in the beginning of the 20th century, this happened. At the end of the 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century, Jewish immigration was coming to Palestine at the time, and the Arabs followed this immigration because they could find work there.
So what you're saying in your book basically is the Balfour Declaration is the legal basis for the Jews to have all the land of it, including Jordan, because you make the case for Jordan should be part of Israel.
No, I didn't say that. I said that the Balfour Declaration was the basis for the San Remo Revolution. The San Remo Revolution divided the Middle East, not the Balfour Declaration. But the San Remo copied the Balfour Declaration word by word, and made it compulsory on the Britain.
And what year was the San Remo Declaration?
Sorry?
What year was the San Remo?
1920.
1920.
25th of April 1920 was the resolution, and it divided the Middle East. Now, you cannot say that Israel does not exist, but Syria exists, because it's a package deal. When it was divided, and that's how Iraq was established, Syria was established, Lebanon was established, Hijaz was established as states, and the Palestinian mandate was given to the mandate of Palestine was given to the Jewish people.
So in 1920, so they copied the Balfour Declaration, so they envisioned Jordan and all what's today Israel to be part of a Jewish state. That was 1920.
Right.
Okay. Our guest is Professor Abraham Zion. He's written a fascinating book, To Whom Was the Promised Land Promised, published in Israel by Mazel Publishers. He also is a professor emeritus at our university. He also is a specialist in law. He chaired the Center for Law and Mass Media. He was a former deputy state attorney for the state of Israel. So here we have Winston Churchill comes along in 1921. He changes the equation of what happened in 1920, which was just a reaffirmation of the Balfour Declaration. So legally, was he allowed to do that? Because they're still the sovereign power.
He was not allowed to do that, but he did it. And he did it. And he got the confirmation from the League of Nations. The League of Nations also made a big mistake by giving him this confirmation. But they confirmed this. So I don't know what Jordan now is not on the table as part of the Jewish state, but the West Bank, Judea and Samaria is. We're talking about settlements in the West Bank. When they say that they are illegal, this is all nonsense. How can they be illegal? Because how did they become? Nobody's explaining how did they become Palestinian Arab territory.
So they're going to say to Professor Zion, they're going to say, listen, the League of Nations declare that there be, this division, and the Jordan had this land, and they have resolutions from the United Nations. So they're going to point to a whole string of legal victories for what's the so-called Palestinian Arabs, and say that's the basis for the fact that Israel should not be in control of Judea and Samaria.
Why?
They can point to all these legal documents. So you're only is the only proof that you have is the Balfour Declaration, which was confirmed in 1920, or is there other proofs that as well?
No, the Balfour Declaration was approved by the Allied powers. Then the San Remo resolution was made after the Ottomans transferred the sovereignty to the Allied powers. And then you have the mandate, the British mandate in Palestine, which was confirmed and approved by all members of the League of Nations, 51 members, and also of the Council of the League of Nations. Now, this did not change. Now, in 1945, in the United Nations Charter, you have Article 80 that says that all the rights that were made before the Second World War will continue, and you have nothing to contradict that. So the fact that the Jewish people own the area of Judea and Samaria is based on international law. There is nothing in international law that says that the Arabs, the Palestinian Arabs, have any rights, any national rights in this area, neither in Judea, nor in Samaria, nor in the Gaza Strip.
Now, what I'm curious about is that Jerusalem was supposed to be part of Israel in 1948, but the Jordanians captured it. The world still calls it the occupied territory, but didn't Israel reconquer what it was theirs, even according to the rules of the game in 1948?
Well, the Balfour Declaration and all these international treaties that were made in the beginning of the 20th century did not change, did not take other
So
forms.
how do we convince the world? Or you ask the average person, and you ask the average. So many people, including Jews, believe that Israel does not, that the Judean Samaria does not belong to. They say you took it from the Palestinians. So if you're providing the legal basis, which no other publisher wanted to publish, so how do we convince the legal experts in the world that this indeed is the case?
Well, you see, the whole world never mentions the Balfour Declaration, nor the San Remo resolution, nor the British mandate, as if it does not exist. That's the whole thing. They cannot contradict those treaties. What they do is that they just are indifferent to them. They just don't mention them at all. They don't rely on them, and we did not make any efforts to rely on them so far. And this is one of the things that I've been trying to do with the Israeli government, to convince the Israeli government that they should rely on it. But so far I've been unsuccessful, I must say.
Have you had any luck with Likud lawmakers? It would seem to me that they might be more sympathetic and more open to what you're saying.
Well, I was a Likud member. I'm still a member of the Central Committee of the Likud Party. And when I was more active in the past, and I had a newspaper or a magazine that is called Yad. And there I put in all the information that I'm telling you now. Well, most of the information I'm telling you now. And it wasn't so effective, because there's one thing. One thing is to decide on your rights, and the other thing is to deal with the world. I believe that, for example, Netanyahu did not press on this because he was afraid that the repercussions would be different, would be difficult. But Netanyahu, for example, agrees with my step, with what I'm saying. But it's funny that they say that Jerusalem belongs to the Arabs, because Jerusalem was part of Judea and Samaria. It was part of the Jewish homeland. It wasn't said that nothing in those treaties said that Jerusalem is to be ousted out of this.
But Jordan got Judea and Samaria in 1947, correct? When their state was established?
1948.
Not 1947?
No,
established?
They invaded the Jewish state in 1948.
Right.
After Britain left the the area
left
in
here, right? All the Arab
on
countries,
the Nile.
including Jordan, invaded the new state of Israel, and Judea and Samaria, Hebron, that was all part of Israel that they took. I thought they only took Jerusalem in 1940. I thought they had the other areas.
No, they captured, they conquered all the West Bank,
In
and
1946.
they called it, and you know, in British, you don't find in British protocols or documents the West Bank. You find Judea and Samaria.
And so George, so you're saying during the war,
Jordan called
in
it the West Bank. Jordan called it the West Bank when it annexed it in order to take away all the connection between the Jewish people in this area.
So just to reiterate, so in 1948, when Jordan with the other Arab countries invaded Israel, they not only took Jerusalem, they took Judea and Samaria in 1948.
Right.
I didn't know that.
And they annexed it a few years later.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating. Professor Abraham Zion, his book is called To Whom Was the Promised Land? Promised some fundamental truths about the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's published by Mazo Publishers. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing some insight. And I hope people do pay attention to what you're saying, because you provide a legal basis, not only for Israel, but for all Judea and Samaria, and for Jordan too. So, and I did, when you were Likudik, when you were young, didn't you sing Shtei Gadot HaYarden, Two Sides of the Jordan? Didn't you sing that as a kid?
I did, yeah.
Okay. So what happened?
I did, but I did not believe what I was saying. I did not know the legal basis of that. I know it now.
Now you know it now.
For that.
When did they stop singing Shtei Gadot HaYarden in Likud and Beitar circles? When did it fall out of favor to sing that song?
Well, when there was an acceptance of the situation that Jordan is there to stay. It's something. Sometimes it says, we say that it's in our interest that Jordan, Hashemite kingdom is there. I think it's wrong.
Didn't Ariel Sharon say that Jordan is a Palestinian state? Because most of the majority of the inhabitants that live there are Jordanian. 80% of Jordan are really what you would call from Palestine.
This was in the 60s.
Right.
I think, but not now.
Not
in his later years. In his later years,
he changed.
He changed, yeah.
Professor Abraham Zion, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My pleasure.